each other.
I forgot to turn the recording on. Thanks, Sarah.
So I think both articles give sort of a call to action. Ferretti says the issue is not if ChatGPT and other AI tools will be used in evaluation, but how and with what boundaries. And Reed says, as we become inundated with artificial intelligence, we must stop to consider how evaluation and evaluators can contribute to social betterment and a just society for all, not privileging some and disadvantaging others. So, oh, sorry. Before we move to this activity, does anyone have any thing they want to bring up from their reading of the articles or reactions to any of these things that I pulled?
I just have kind of something to keep in mind as we talk. I did not see any mention of confidentiality in those articles. And, my understanding of ChatGPT is that, the information kind of goes into continuing to train the model. And I'm thinking of the fact that many of us work with marginalized populations in a variety of ways, vulnerable folks, and how that information could somehow be mined. I just putting it out there. I was a little, now I could have missed it because I did it a really, I would say, a vigorous skim of the both articles, but I didn't catch anything on that.
No, they didn't include anything on that. There was, I think, one other article in that issue that did, but it wasn't one that I selected. That really was the topic of the, I don't know if everybody was here when I said that I just came from a webinar by the Indiana Evaluation Institute on fresh perspectives on AI for evaluation. And that has a lot of discussion of that. And so as soon as I get that recording, I will share it with all of you because I think it would be, that would be a good thing for people to watch and to discuss as well, because it really gets into those the confidentiality issues.
Thank you.
For example, Nuno said that, now, and I think ChatGPT has this now, I know it's in Claude, there's a button that you can check that says you don't want them to use your data. But Nuno said, I wouldn't really trust them. So he said a lot of money goes into their databases, and they're not going to let you know what's in there or not. So there's no way for you to know whether or not it's really, being used or not. So his advice is, if it's confidential data, don't add it. And some people said even de-identify data, depending upon the sensitivity of the data itself. So that did come up there. Any other comments about the articles, reactions?
I did a quick rigorous skim like Andrea did. So I haven't used AI as much as probably some of the others have. So I'm here to sort of learn and whatnot, as opposed to providing my insights. I don't have any yet.
Okay. Well, I thought for what we could do that would allow us to kind of get a little practice here, since people wanted to have practical examples of using AI, and if we, take Ferretti's article to heart, that it's the hacking that makes the difference, or the prompt, and I think it is the idea of you get what you ask for. And so Ferretti has a number of tables in that article. And if you, I do have the links to those articles in the chat, so everybody should be able to access them. So why don't we start there and make sure that everybody can get them or has them. Because you'll need to use the articles for the activity. Let me just open up the Ferretti article too. Let's see. There. Okay, does everyone have the, let me ask it this way, is there anyone who doesn't have the articles? Okay, and can you see the Ferretti article on my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you'll see that there are a number of tables in the article with a particular evaluation activity associated with a possible prompt. And if we use the Reed article to think about this from an equity lens, we could think of some of these prompts, many of these prompts, as being sort of agnostic when it comes to equity. And Reed says that makes it particularly vulnerable to whatever biases are built in. So what we're going to do is take a little time, and since we're a small group, I think we could probably just work individually and then discuss in the larger group. So what we're going to do is choose some prompts, and I think we can do more than one round from any of these tables in the Ferretti article. And then let me go back to my apply. We're going to apply Reed's equity considerations from her article, which I've summarized here as, so who benefits or who might be excluded by the prompt as written in Ferretti's article, what biases might be embedded, how does the prompt address power dynamics or not? Does it consider diverse stakeholder voices and perspectives? What intended consequences might arise? Not all of those things, but thinking about how you could revise the prompt to better address equity. And so we'll do a round and then talk about it as a group. I have an example that I did here in case that sort of helps. So in Ferretti, from table 1, I chose this prompt: generate questions for a focus group discussion on whatever topic with whatever participants. And so in looking at some of the equity considerations, it doesn't take into account that there are power dynamics in focus groups, depending on who's in the room. It might miss cultural considerations in a group discussion where not everybody is comfortable contributing. It could overlook accessibility needs. It might not consider different ways of expressing perspectives. So in adapting the prompt, then it might be that there's opening questions. I would say to it, so generate a question for a focused discussion on topic with participants, whatever that might be, and make sure to include an opening question that has a welcoming, inclusive environment, multiple ways for participants to share their views, questions that explore both positive and challenging experience. In other words, I add to the prompt for it to take on or consider equity questions. And when I did that, I tried it out to see what the difference was. So I told it to generate 5 questions for a focus group discussion on professional development with new high school math and science teachers. Happens to be what I do. So, and I just chose one of those questions to show you. So just with the basic prompt and not including any of those considerations that I showed you in the prior slide, it just asks what specific teaching challenges keep you up at night, what kind of professional development will help you address those challenges. And with the read lens included, it adds some elements to the question that take into account who the people are, what they might, and what kinds of cultural considerations might be involved. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay, what we're gonna do here. Okay, so let's, oops. Sorry, having trouble with my slides. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's just take let's just take about 5 minutes to try to do one round. And then we'll talk and see if we have time for, another round or not. Does that sound okay to everybody? We all know what we're doing? All right. If you have access to GPT, ChatGPT or another AI tool, once you revise the prompt, if you want to actually plug it in there and see what you get, that'd be great too. How are people doing? You need more time? You okay? All right, let me. So. So let's talk a little bit, first of all, about what you came up with. So, before we get into these questions, so anyone want to give an example?
Yeah, I can go first.
Okay,
So I asked ChatGPT to outline a half-day training module on community health needs assessments for public health practitioners and evaluators. And I actually thought it did a pretty good job throughout the 4-hour session plan that it devised. In several spots, it actually included both ethical considerations and also considerations for marginalized populations and other diverse populations. So I thought it did a pretty good job. I didn't think I had to revise my prompt from the one sentence concise command that I gave it. But I'm interested to hear what other folks have experienced.
I um didn't try the actual prompt because I think I would need some data to actually plug into this, but one thing I've noticed some of my team members do is use Chat GPT as a starting point to analyze open-ended text responses from like surveys or focus groups or anything like that to help summarize themes. And so there is a prompt in table 4 about like content analysis for findings and recommendations. And the prompt feels fairly simple, that based on the information provided in the following text, summarize findings. And then it has a follow-up prompt to derive recommendations on blank topic for blank audience. So when I was just thinking through the questions about like what implications this might have, I felt like there's nothing specific to have said. The information that I provided was from like this audience, these people responded, some of their like demographic breakdowns where like we might typically gather responses and understand what age group they're in or gender or some race, ethnicity. But if like that doesn't get tied into the open-ended text, it might lose some of that meaning behind it. So, and maybe other questions that might have been linked to the open-ended responses that might just inform how or why they answered certain ways. But so yeah, like I said, though, haven't had a chance to test it, but
right. Yeah. Well, those seem like good considerations. I mean, even if you start with that initial prompt, then you can always follow with additional considerations. Any others?
Well, I didn't do this, but I just wonder if this would be something that might be an interesting thing to try. So there was in the table 1, I think it talked about asking it to create a log frame,
Mhm.
the logic model. And I wonder if you could change that prompt to ask it to generate a log frame table for a program with a different approach to evaluation.
Mhm.
I don't know if you can do that or not. So let's say it was with the equity informed approach. Would that take care of the situation of, being value neutral in terms of the pedantic one?
Well, how about if we just try it? So here's Claude. So create a log frame. Is that the language that
That's what they used in theirs. Yeah, log frame for a program on and then you put whatever program it is.
Okay, pick one, sure.
How about? Oh, no, I'm blanking out here.
Someone nominate.
You can use, like, say, for group homes,
Okay, that sounds good.
What'd you say, Stan? I'm sorry.
group homes.
Okay. We're, well, let's just start there and then see what comes up and then we can go from there. Okay, so
It
he
needs
wants
more
more
information.
information. So what should we tell him? It's going to serve youth.
Yeah, say it's gonna serve youth, and let's say it is one group home. And the group home is in Ohio.
Oh, I misspelled it, but it gets.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. You know, for people who are going through an accreditation, especially a council on accreditation, this would be absolutely positively fantastic. Because most of the organizations I've had to review, they don't know how to do program logic models.
Right, I'm gonna ask it to. Right, so I told it now to use an equity framework.
My God.
Okay. So now you can see both in terms of the indicators and the outputs
Unbelievable.
that it's looking for equity metrics.
I like the question that they prompt at the bottom is like, would you like me to elaborate on any of these? And
Mhm.
I just feel I have like fear around people like using these somewhat blindly, like just putting it on paper without like understanding.
Yeah, actually, reviewing them.
Mhm.
But yeah, or provide specific examples about how certain equity measures could be implemented.
Mhm.
I have a question that I'm a slow reader and that went through
Oh,
pretty
I'm sorry,
quickly.
yeah, it did.
But did it put together the previous framework with this one? Did it build on it? It almost seemed like it was completely equity focused. I could be wrong. Oh, okay. So it has the general questions in there
Mhm.
too.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it definitely, I mean, you can see a big difference in terms of the metrics they care about. It cares about in the second example. And also, we said there that just use an equity lens, right? And you could be very specific about, for example, I could have given it Reed's the questions that I had there and said, use these questions to revise or use these considerations to revise. So,
I tried something similar. I asked it to create a half-day training around how evaluators can collaborate together. And then I added a prompt that said what biases, or what did I say? What biases are embedded in the training agenda? And then it came up with a bunch. And so it was like assumption of shared context or an expertise or experience, focus on Western collaboration norms, preference for technology-driven solutions, because the original agenda said like communicating via Slack or sharing tasks on Asana, for example. Emphasis on formalized processes, so talking about this agenda leans heavily on structured collaboration framework, neglect of power dynamics and intersectionality, assumption of homogeneous work environments, focus on evaluators alone, and then it gave a bunch of ideas on how to address the biases.
Hmm.
So to me, that seems like it can be useful as a planning tool in that instance, Kristen, so you could think about those pieces. For the log frame, it might be something that, I don't know, maybe you could use, like if I'm teaching evaluation course and they have an assignment to create a logic model, they could use that as a starting point, but then add in, because the question is, where's the human interaction in this, you know? A little bit in terms of like, then how do you get stakeholders to say, yeah, that's it, or do you take away their critical thinking and teaching them about evaluative thinking, for that matter, if you just give them something.
It's not strokeholders, it's stakeholders.
Well, it's got a lot of ideas.
Mhm.
Then the other question I would have is, what is it defining as stakeholders? Is it the youth or is it the family?
Both staff, program administration.
Is there potential to get some kind of scholarly or practitioner references that back up having used some of these approaches?
Well, this is one of the things that people really wanted, our case examples, right? And Ferretti's article actually is the most practical that I found in terms of giving actual examples of prompts and prompts that's, she's used. But that's the idea for February, is to try to see if we can get some members who actually are using it to, demonstrate how they use it. And to be able to, assemble sort of a set of cases. So far, no one has volunteered, so I'm hoping that someone will, or some ones will. I think it would be nice to have a panel of people who used it, who have used it, in evaluation, that could really demonstrate how they use it.
I wonder too, Jody, if you could use that panel as a jumping off point for putting in a proposal to MAE or something. Maybe that would get people to want to be on the panel, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, I can't actually go to MAE this year because our staff retreat is during that time. But yeah, but I don't have to organize it. Maybe someone else can. So yeah, I'll send out another notice about that. So it seems like people have had have some good ideas about how, to balance both efficiency and equity. Are there any challenges that
The biggest challenge is, again, this is something that's relatively new. So you're working under an assumption that people know how to use AI. And like, for instance, for myself, I haven't, but I got to tell you, if I could figure out a way to use AI on how to develop program logic models, that, just as a start, or I mean, I could see organizations finding this very helpful because, again, since I'm a peer reviewer for the Council on Accreditation, or now known as Social Current, they're very big on program logic models, and a lot of organizations do not have the skill or wherewithal about how to develop really what a program logic model per se. And I tell you, this would be unbelievable. I mean, if organizations knew how to use this, it would be, and again, it would also help them develop organizational learning tools as a result, which I think is one of the things that you would want to get out of this as well. And then the only final thing I would just say is I'm thinking back to good old days of Michael Scriven, the ethics behind this, that, do people understand these are tools that are being used, and it's, the confidentiality and the HIPAA requirements and things like that is something also that needs to be considered. But I mean, again, like I said, for organizations that go through an accreditation process, this would be fantastic.
Yeah, one of the things that they talked about in that other webinar too was transparency with stakeholders about AI use. And that is an ethical consideration. I mean, people should know if you're using the tools in a way that, impacts them, that there should be transparency around that.
And culturally, that would also be important because, again, there's a cultural dynamic involved here. Because, like I said, if you're an organization that's dealing with a number of different ethnic groups, they may have no understanding of what this is all about. Maybe the young people would, but the older ones would have no idea. But this would be, again, something to consider.
Any other thoughts? Mircha, any thoughts? I think you seems like you're familiar with AI. You consider yourself a user?
Sorry, my volume just cut out for a second there. Yeah, it's very interesting because from when I started using it, I'd say in 2023 to today, there's been such a change that I've noticed in the quality, in the level of analysis, in the introspection even of the AI. At the beginning, you could really tell when something was done or written by AI. And now it's getting harder and harder because the AI is self-critical, it's introspective in a way that is shocking to me, that it's gotten to this point so fast. And part of that has come in the form of greater ethical considerations, greater concern for equity, part of which I think it's developed over that time because people have been feeding that information into it. It's been producing something, and then people have been asking, how can you make this more ethical? How can you consider this through an equity lens? And I think more and more it's learning that it needs to do that from the get-go. But then I think a few weeks ago you had you mentioned a question that you sometimes pose it that I found really helpful, which is, you said, Jody, that you ask your AI tools, how did you get to this point? Walk me through your steps. And since you mentioned that, I've started using that myself, and that has also been helpful. So, yeah,
Yeah,
those are just some of my thoughts.
yeah, it helps me as a check, a way to check and see, you know, how it's thinking about this. Well, I thought a fun way to end would be to give you some advice from Claude. So I asked Claude, oops, wait. If you were going to advise me on how to use you to be efficient without sacrificing ethics or equity, what would you say? And he also read the articles. So here's his Claude's, I don't know, Claude, I call Claude a he, I shouldn't, but it's advice. Give you a moment to read that.
I like his point on number 4. Use me as a thought partner rather than an authority.
Mhm. Okay. Ready for the next slide?
With regard to point 5, there's got to be an understanding that not all stakeholders have an idea of what artificial intelligence is,
Right.
what it's supposed to do. Because again, like I said, when I go and I evaluate, I do reviews of organizations going through accreditation. I'm dealing with a variety of populations with very different mindsets. And the other main problem you're going to have is like, especially if you're dealing with community providers or if you're dealing with the clients, you're going to have some, they're going to say, I have no idea what in hell you're talking about.
Mhm. Well, and I guess it's an opportunity for education.
Yeah.
And creating awareness. So some stakeholders may need more explanation
Right.
than others. That's a good point.
I would be interested to know what a small low stake task is.
I would think
What-
that, yeah, I would think something like asking it to, create um, um, an agenda for something,
Mhm.
would be probably a small, like,
I feel like I've only used it in a small capacity, just kind of playing around with it. And like one thing I've done like with surveys is if I want to I know the question I want to ask, but it would be helpful to have close-ended options or choices. So I've asked it to like help me just generate choices. A team member of mine uses his Chat GPT to ask about how to like write the right calculation for more like complex his visual tools that he's using. Um, and something I've noticed is on social media, they have like AI prompts. Like I write out my initial prompt of kind of what I want to say, and it's like, do you want to say this with more of a certain emotion, like more pride or more sadness or so? And so then it will help like reframe something you wrote with that emotion. And I thought that was really interesting.
yeah, or if, revise a paragraph for flow. And you can be specific, about for grammar, for flow, for, or 2 paragraphs and ask it to improve the transition or.
I love that final point. The key is finding the balance between leveraging AI efficiency while maintaining human wisdom, relationships, and ethical judgment. I think that is without question an important point.
Well, that's what Claude had to say about our topic. Okay, any closing comments or takeaways or anything people want to add?
Well, what would be very good is if there was a way of doing an intro to AI for people who have like myself, who has very limited experience in this area. You know, how do you where do you get AI? You know, how do you use ChatGPT and all that kind of stuff? That would be very, very helpful.
You know, they the nonprofit I work for, Knowles, it has an academy associated with it where some of our experienced teachers put together and facilitate workshops, and they have one called AI Essentials for educators. And so, Stan, it makes me think that is there already, or could there be an AI Essentials for evaluators? So maybe I'll get in touch with AEA and see if there's such a thing, or if there would be an interest in, someone putting together something like that.
I
'Cause
think
think
that's very, very, very helpful.
Okay. Yeah, the one that our fellows are doing, the AI Essentials for Educators, has just gotten great reviews from the participants. That they've found like it's just enough, and so I'll look at what they do and see how it might be adapted and get in touch with AEA about that. And then February meeting, we are hoping. So Cheryl, I will put out that idea of doing that it could be an MAE presentation, and see if there's anyone who'd be willing to sort of spearhead that, and if we can get some actual cases.
And I gotta, just as a final point, I really, really gotta tell you, if there was some way of doing some kind of a workshop on how to use AI to do program logic models, I tell you, I know for some organizations that would be worth its weight in gold.
Mhm. Right, we have our work cut out for us. Any other comments? Cheryl, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, everybody, for your participation today. And if you are using AI in your work and would be willing to just have it might even be just a conversation about how you're using it. Maybe panel is for
Yeah.
February might be too scary, but not scary, but I think people might think they have to be like solidly presenting something. But
Yeah.
I think that all the examples we talked about today are interesting. So I think just adding more examples is really helpful.
Maybe we
So if
just
one of you on here has
fully
got some,
AI.
let Jody know.
And it doesn't just have to be you. If you have a colleague that, would be willing to we'll just call it stories of AI and evaluation, who want,
There you go.
to tell a story about how they're using it. Let's, please let me know.
Okay, well, see you next month then.
All right.
And for Andrea and Jody, if you can hang on for a minute, we'll talk. Okay, thanks.
Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Bye.